Hey everyone, it's Louisa Munson from Feel Good Astrology, and I've got a feel good conversation with somebody I'm really excited to talk to. This is somebody I've been friends with for a really long time on Facebook, and I've been following her journey, and we've had quite a few little private conversations. We have some shared interests. So anyway, my guest today is somebody who studied the molecular basis of disease. She is a scientist, first and foremost, a field application scientist, in fact, and funnily enough, was working with PCR tests for many, many years. She is a mum of two. So she's got a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old. And since she's become a mum, she's been on a very serious journey of awakening that has really changed her belief systems and made her question the very scientific basis of her belief systems. She absolutely loves science and loves the process of researching, and she really doesn't like these kind of superficial conversations. She really likes to go in deep. So I'm very, very excited about this. In recent years, she has become a homeschooling mum. And has been connecting more in an intuitive way, and it's all about heart, and it's all really very much about connection. So I'm very excited to bring her on. Should we bring her on? It's my absolute pleasure and delight to bring on my guest today, and that is Bridget Early. Bridget, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Thank you. I'm great. I'm so happy to chat with you today.
I know it's been quite a long time. We've been friends on social media for, you were saying off air, for possibly 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And it's our first actual real conversation. And I've often looked at the posts that you've written with absolute awe because, there's some similarities in our journey, in as much as we're both mums, we're both very interested in health and healing. And we both have an interest in digging down to the truth of the matter about things. We're also homeschooling mums. So I'm really happy that we've got this chance to hang out. So what I want to ask you about today, if that's okay, is your transition from working as a field application scientist. So you've got all this amazing training in the molecular basis of disease. And now you are a mum and also still avidly researching. Talk to me about that, if that's okay.
Yeah. So what a wild 10 years it's been. 8 years since I became a mom.
Yeah.
It's been an incredible journey. I feel like every mom kind of goes through an awakening of sorts once it's not just you anymore. You're taking care of something that you helped create. So I think we start thinking a little deeper about things, and that definitely happened for me. And yep, I was totally obsessed with my career and science as a religion, you might say. And I have come so far since then. But yeah, so becoming a mom awoken me to like, well, what am I putting into my body? It kind of started pretty gentle. Do I want to use more gentle alternatives instead of just mainstream allopathic medicine, treating the symptoms? I always kind of had a troubled health story ever since I was younger, and kind of a medical mystery, and no one could ever get to the root of it. So I started to get more curious about that as I became a mother, and then noticing my children were having things. I now have 2 children. Charlie's almost 8 and Catherine is 6. So watching them start to have sensitivities that I had when I was younger really started to open me up to maybe there was a different way than what most people were talking about or mainstream media was talking about. So I started as my research self to just research and try to find truth, and then to also, ground in and try to see like, what was my body saying? Like, we have great intuition as mothers, not just about our own bodies, but about our children and what's going on with them. So starting to strengthen that muscle and pull away from, I was very entangled, I would say, into the medical system, and just with my former career and all of the things I had seen and just been flabbergasted by at times in my former life in the biotech world. So yeah, it's been an awakening process is the only way to say it. And I'm thankful that I have found like-minded people around me, and that I've also just learned to trust myself again. I feel like we get so dissociated and disconnected, and we're not taught to trust ourselves. We're taught to look outward. So just being on that journey of trying to just be connected with myself and trust myself again. And it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, it's interesting you say like trust yourself again, because I mean, if we think about recent times, the main mantra has been trust the science, and obviously you came from the science world. I know lots of scientists who are parents who never stop being scientists and who never stop trusting the science. And I guess, we could have all sorts of actual conversations, because presumably the scientific method you can trust, but there are obviously ways that the scientific method can be tweaked and sort of illustrated. I guess if you get the wrong starting point, or if you start with the wrong premise in the first place, that's going to skew your results. But actually, aside from science, what I'd really like to know is, how did you actually make that transition from knowing that you needed to disconnect from the science? Because like you say, you were entangled in it, and it's a very strong mindset to trust an outside authority, but then have the wisdom or have something happen that makes you have to come and trust yourself. Right. What happened exactly?
Yeah, ours was not a gentle ride. Let's see. Yeah, I completely trusted the system. I was part of the system. So, and I was financially involved in the system. So I was pretty deep into my beliefs. And I am a person who I can see things from all sides. Like I am very, that's just a part of my personality. I am very open-minded. So, but I can also, as I used to do, I would just see it from the one side, because I'd never looked behind the curtain. I had never looked at anything else. I had just listened and been extremely indoctrinated. My ego was very involved, and it was social media. I started to become more holistic in my approach to health, and I had started to see more people in my social media that were talking about things that I didn't want to look at.
Like what?
Involving this.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't want to get us shut down, or I don't know if we can be. We're pretty free here, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So, right. Vaccinations. So I had completely been trusting in that. And I just remember around me, the conversations in the science community were, those people are crazy. Those people are nuts who even question this, right? So I was just like, oh, I don't want to be crazy. I don't want to be nuts. But gently, I was seeing other people that I respected talking about it. And no one ever came to me and said, don't do this. No one was ever harsh. Like, people started to say to me, you're an intelligent person, you're research minded, just do a little research on your own. Look at PubMed, where you have published articles yourself. Look there and look at some things and look at an insert. Let's just start super small. So I remember being absolutely terrified. I just was like, well, if there is any harm here, what have I done, first of all? And is everything a sham? Like, my whole life has been built on these systems. So I remember being very terrified and whenever, like, my one sister would bring it up to me, and whenever she would bring up that I should do some research, I would be very defensive. I just was like, you don't know. I know. I was in the system, blah, blah, blah. So finally I did a little research, and really I just skimmed the surface on a few ingredients, But what really shook me was when I took my daughter to her pediatrician, and we were late she had missed a couple appointments. So I knew they were going to like jam her up with like 6 or 7 shots. And when I asked to see an insert when I walked into the room, I was immediately treated differently. And I'm a very intuitive, energy feeling person. So, you know, you can control your face, but like I can feel your energy.
Yeah.
And it just, the way I was treated and the way things changed, that was the number one sign for me. Like, I need to do even more research when I get home. So I ended up giving her, she did get a couple shots that day, and I turned down a couple. But within a couple weeks, her stomach issues went from moderate to severe. So that to me was also just like, there is something going on here. So then I kind of, I went down the rabbit hole and I looked at all the research I could find and looked at inflammation, detox pathways, all sorts of things, and started to put some things together for myself. And it really wasn't until my son was diagnosed with autism that I really started to think we need to change our lifestyle. How am I going to talk to my husband about this? To go from such an extreme of I was in the system and trusting the system, then to like, we're going to change our lifestyle. Being in my body and very grounded and intuitive, I knew what the answer was. But that's harder to then like communicate and get your partner to see. So when I was pregnant with my daughter, my son was 1.5 years, and I had been traveling a lot, and I traveled a lot for my job, and I had gotten like a double promotion. I was doing great. Like, I was moving up the corporate ladder. Everything was going as planned. And when I was pregnant with my daughter, I contributed to the extra estrogen that was in my body. I became even more intuitive, and there was a process that happened. I'm not sure exactly what happened. However, I instantly knew I needed to leave my career. And I went to, it was actually a training that my boss had sent me to, it was like a strength finders training. And they said the first day, some people that are here end up leaving their career or switching their careers. Like, we're really going to dig in deep and like find what your sole purpose is. And I just thought, oh no, like, is this what's going to do it? And it was. And what's the most bizarro thing about that whole trip was I ended up deciding I was for sure leaving my career, and I got pregnant with my daughter. So I got pregnant with my daughter there, and then within like 2 to 3 months, like, I knew I needed to leave, but I formulated a plan and was like, okay, I had a career coach help me figure out how to talk to my husband about this big change, because I was the breadwinner. We had kind of built our whole lives around my career. I was always just focused on my career. So I knew I was going to exit, and it was very, the way my colleagues reacted. I guess it's your typical story of, oh, she just wants to be a mom. But it was very, I don't know. It's once I started talking more about our autism journey and what I knew about the connection between autism and vaccines, I really got blackballed. And it was kind of an intense process. But I think sometimes things have to be intense to really get your attention and know that you're going to walk a path that isn't going to be very popular with a lot of people. So that we've seen a lot of people exit our lives since all of that. But we now have, doing our homeschool journey, we're new to that. We have a whole new community of like-minded people, and I finally feel like I've found my people, and they're here, and it's beautiful. It's been a really tumultuous ride here, but we're here now.
Wow. That's really incredible. Like, given the level of indoctrination that I'm, sure you've been through, because there's definitely something in it to do with peer pressure. It takes a lot to be able to stand in your conviction, and also to trust your intuition, trust your gut, and to know when something isn't quite right. But to stand for it is really incredible. And I see this happening around the world right now. We're all being called to trust our intuition, and it's a painful process. And like, you've already had people exit your life, it feels like there are lots of people sorting through things at the moment. Everyone I'm talking to at the moment, like, their communities are changing. Can I just take you back? You mentioned that that there is a connection, or there can be a connection, between autism and vaccines. Did you notice a difference in both of your children before vaccines and after?
So and I know we'll get into this in a little bit. I don't know for sure. I think with my son, from birth, he was always very much in his own world. And I don't know, because he had vaccines at the hospital. And now, knowing what I know, I think that maybe he had a reaction and a mini seizure at the hospital after a vaccine, and they didn't obviously tell us that was what was going on. They rushed him away. I didn't know what was going on. He had a lot of issues from teeny tiny. Things got severe when he was 3. And that's when we kind of like hit rock bottom and we figured out what was going on. But I didn't really know anything about autism before that. So the things that were going on with him, and he was my first child, and I don't have a lot of family nearby. I don't have people in my life that would be like, oh, this isn't normal. Like, I was just kind of like floating in the abyss, like, oh, what's happening here? So, and with my daughter, and it's so different between girls and boys. That's something I'm very passionate about too, is the acknowledgement for girls. It's very, very different. So I don't know for sure. And it has so much to do with your detox pathways. And it's like 99.9% of children with an autism diagnosis, which it's actually kind of hard to get an autism diagnosis these days, but they have mutations in their detox pathways. That's just a thing. Like, it's
Is it the MTHR?
is the most common one, yes, and there's a couple others too, and that's a whole thing. Now, I see a lot. This is a little sidestep, but I feel like it's important to say, just because we have those detox pathway impairments, like, we hold on to toxins and heavy metals and things. Like, do I think that vaccines were designed to cause harm? No, I don't. I think that over time, we have been like inundated with so much that our bodies can't handle it. And there are some things that are even linked to MTHR, mutations. Like, we kind of know what causes those. So there's this whole trickle down effect of all those things. And we'll talk about it a little bit later, but even like your belief systems, maybe not yours specifically, but somewhere in your bloodline, we hold stress in our body from 14 generations past, and that affects the of our DNA. And science has proven this. Like, this isn't even some like woo-woo thing. It's amazing. And so even those pathways, like, if you find out you do have those pathways and you're like, oh, I'm compromised, I don't detox as well, there are actually ways to change the expression of those pathways. They're called single nucleotide polymorphisms. Those are the SNPs. Those are the changes in the DNA. And they're called polymorphic for a reason, because they can change. So I see a lot of people that there's all communities now of like MTHFR, like all of this propaganda around that stuff. And that's great. Acknowledgement is great. But then we get stuck in that label that, oh no, we are this now. No, you're not even that. Like, let's not stop there. Like, there are ways, but I think that can be part of like the healing process. It's good to find out that just don't get stuck there. Just don't stay in that forever.
It's interesting, Bridget, that you mentioned that because my husband and I, and in fact, we might have actually met earlier on social media because we used to volunteer, and my husband used to work for Britain's oldest charity to help people with additional needs. And so he was running a project where he set up a radio station, and he trained up well over 50 presenters of young adults, all who had an autism diagnosis, and some other, similar diagnoses. And because I was living on site at the charity, and we used to do bring and share meal, and do things to involve the whole community, I got to know quite a few of the, I'm going to call them autism mums. Because I saw myself as being on the periphery and just observing what was going on. And I was, at that time, I had my boy, my eldest, and I may have been pregnant with my daughter. But I came up against a lot of autism identity politics. So one of the things that I noticed was you can't talk about it as if it's a defect, as if it's something that has been caused. For a lot of people, autism is their identity. And there are lots of families that talk about autism, this is the way I am, and I'm perfect the way I am. This is who I am. God made me perfect. And then I came across different I came across different families who definitely had a journey whereby the mums can privately, obviously not in public, but privately confided that the symptoms all began after their first vaccines or their second round of vaccines. So I came across a mixed bag. Some people that were very much in the mindset of autism and this is who we are and you need to accept us the way we are, almost believing that nothing could resolve and their lives have to be about honoring the way that they're wired and the way that they think. And then there were mums who, saw and experienced damage. What can you share about that? Because I'm imagining you come up against that quite a bit.
Oh, yes. That is such a great entryway into an important discussion. So I think as humans, especially when we experience trauma and isolation and pain, having a label and an experience, a box we can put ourselves in, sometimes is a comforting experience. And I think that's beautiful. And I think you can get out of that box. Not everybody's going to, and that's their journey. And it is so hard to know that you've made a decision to do something with your child and you see a reaction to that. And sometimes that's too much to bear, I think, as parents, to then confront that. Like, was there something that we should have known or could have known to change this? And sometimes that's too much for people. And I think sometimes that then stems into a group of we are fine the way we are. And don't get me wrong, like, there are beautiful, beautiful things with my son having the diagnosis that he has and some of the strengths that he has because of the way he is. Now, whether I don't think that's from a vaccine, let's not, I'm not going to say like, oh, that side effect that he had, that's great. The inflammation in his brain that has like caused certain things to happen, and these pathways, we do a lot of work on like the neural pathways and, integrating and healing and things. And I just know that it's a lot. I know that it's a lot to come up against. So seeing the people who are walking so proudly with their diagnosis and maybe not looking behind the curtain at all, and I get where their hearts are coming from.
Yeah.
I have come up against a lot with, we were always considered high function. And since we have modified diet, since we've done so many detoxes, since we've done neural pathway work, since I've changed my parenting style, since I've dedicated my life to having him have the best outcome possible, you know, I have come up against a lot of people who don't really like that. And even for a while, our pediatrician said I didn't like the word medically, like we were considered medically healed. It's more, I look at it more as like an integration. Like we have really integrated what we have, and we do focus a lot on strengths. Like there are a lot of strengths. So we have Asperger's, which isn't even a real diagnosis anymore, but there are a lot of beautiful things like brilliance, deep brilliance. And a lot of the characteristic things that you don't normally see with that are like the stereotypes of like being cold, not emotionally available, not loving. And I would say that's the complete opposite of who my son is. I think if things aren't addressed at a young age, it can turn into that because they don't know how to deal with those emotions, and those, like, they have big feelings, they have very big emotions. So we've just done a lot of work on like integrating, and it hasn't, I have learned to choose my audience and to step back a lot on what I talk about. For a while, I thought it was my purpose to give hope to the community on integration and healing. But yeah, you come up against a lot of, even actually, I have a family member who has a son, and we have made completely different lifestyle decisions since our diagnosis, and we approach things very differently. And we don't have a relationship now because of those things. I have a younger son, her son is older. So we're not looked upon always as a beacon of hope because of what we've gone through and what we have discovered. And it's that whole dualistic thing. But again, I can see things from all sides. That's a plus and a minus of my personality. So I have a lot of compassion for that, because I feel like I understand the depth of where that's coming from. And yeah.
I mean, I've seen this kind of behaviors in people. I mean, not just in particular with autism, for instance. You know, if somebody's had a cancer diagnosis, you know, they may well refer to their cancer even when they've recovered. I was diagnosed with ME, or chronic fatigue syndrome, you know, when I was 16, and hospitalized for a short time, and in a hospital plan, and all sorts of different things. And I know people who never recovered from it. And then I also know that I was told, oh, well, we must have misdiagnosed you because it is a condition that you have for life. And I think, actually, no, I did a lot of things.
Well,
I
give me
went
some credit. Like
changes to get where I am. You know, there was a time when I didn't think I'd have children because of chronic fatigue syndrome. But like, we make changes. And I wonder if some of the reticence that people have to see a different perspective, you know, in terms of healing, comes from the fact that you have to almost drop everything that you've ever learned about life, and you have to drop all those trusts that you've put in the medical system. Like, you know, we're taught to trust doctors, teachers, any authority person, like anyone in a white coat, or anyone that assumes authority. We're taught to trust them, and at some level, to be able to even be open-minded to investigate, you have to put these people, not these people, but that you have to almost suspend knowledge for a while and just hold it there and say, well, that might be true, but are there other truths?
right. I think it's so like, oh my goodness, really what I have learned to experience, like as I've learned more about just like how we are bioelectric beings. So we are that. Everything has a frequency.
Yeah.
The medical system has a frequency. And there is, again, like there's like some form of comfort in having that identity. And I think that the medical system really has done a good job of utilizing that diagnosis, that like then you get this identity that, well, you know, this is it. And if you want to just sit in that and live in that, you can.
Yeah.
And there is some comfort there because at least you know now. Maybe you didn't know what was going on before, but now you have some comfort that, oh, I'm not crazy. I have this diagnosis now. I think there's some level of like, there's definitely some interaction, and you're getting something in your bioelectric body for that. There is an exchange that's happening. And I mean, I've even noticed, like, once I started, well, I noticed it with the medical community. And I notice it with the education system, because my daughter is still in the public preschool program. We're working on that with my husband and I, deciding, are we going to homeschool both children? And again, allowing him the time to kind of come to these decisions and things more slowly, whereas initially I just wanted to be like, we're ripping out of every system. Where, okay, maybe slow down a little bit. Let this happen a little more gracefully. So when I interact with those systems, I even notice like what my energy starts to feel like. And I can tell sometimes when I'm having an effect on their energy. And not in like, I don't want to say that it's a negative thing, because at first when it started to happen, I was like, gosh, why does my system feel fried? I mean, is it because I spent all this time on this paperwork, or I'm going back and forth with someone that I'm really not aligned with? You know, I think that the bioelectric stuff and the frequency stuff is so real, as we know, and more information and science is coming out solidifying that, because we can't hide that anymore. But I think that there's such a component to that. And if we don't realize that, if we don't have the awareness of that, we can't even begin to pick that apart, right? Like, once I had the awareness of how frequency and bioelectric stuff was working, I then was able to have a little more confidence in my intuition and things that were kind of like coming in and into my field, and like, why is that affecting me that way? Is that even my energy? Like, why do I feel stressed out right now? Because I just got off the phone with the doctor over nothing serious. So just, you know, I think there's a whole untanglement process that goes on, and it is a process. But like you said too, like being able to be like, okay, there's this information base here that I have, but is there something else that I can look at and educate myself on?
Oh, it's such a vast subject. I'd love to talk to you in a conversation about how you manage the spectrum, you know, and how you know the specific steps that you've taken to home ed and to get the balance back in your life as a mom and within your family. But first of all, I'd really love to talk to you about these SNPs, these single neuropeptides. And the idea of the bioelectric body. I interviewed somebody last year who uses what does he use? He uses tuning forks to work with the bioelectric body. And you know, I've worked, you know, interviewed quite a few different people who talk about different energy systems. So I'd love to delve into that first, if that's okay with you. The 14, like 14, you're going back in your generations. Wow. Like going back in your ancestry.
Right.
How does it all happen? I mean, I know about Masaru Emoto and how water carries a code and a
right.
frequency.
There's a lot out there, and I feel like, so I'm going to pull up a book. This book. So you mentioned Emoto. So this book, have you heard of this? Cancer and the New Biology of Water?
No, I haven't.
Oh, this book. So it's Thomas Cowan, and the forward is done.
I love him.
Yeah, it's so good.
I got a ban on Facebook early on in the pandemic for sharing one of his videos.
Oh, yes, he is good. It's So there's a lot of information in that book that kind of ties together a lot of the stuff, I would say. It talks about the cancer field, but the way it talks about water and how, and you mentioned Emoto, so we know that water holds emotion. Water can be imprinted with emotion, with the frequency of that emotion. And we are water. We are water. And what's so amazing is, and I'll just stop for a quick second and say the 14 generations past thing, when we talk about things like that, sometimes people are like, oh no, like that's so much to hold. Like, I don't want to think that I'm responsible for 14 generations past. Like, I'm not going to take that in. And it's not a fear thing. Like, nothing I ever talk about, I feel like I don't have like a fear. I've done a lot of work with that. Like, I don't talk about things to induce fear. I talk about things to empower people, and awareness is the membrane. Once you are aware of these things, sure, maybe there's some shadowy aspects that you've got to process of your own and ground yourself back into empowerment, and then seeing how, but we were designed this way for a reason, and it wasn't a bad reason. It was so that when our bodies express something, which they do through our DNA, through those changes in DNA, those SNPs, when it expresses something and then has a downstream symptom, that's our body communicating, right? And there's tons of books on this. Like, people talk about this stuff. That's not new news. Our bodies are communicating, and we were designed that way. And because of our busy lifestyles and just the energy of so many things that aren't supporting us to be in our own energy, to feel these things, to be in tune and alignment with those things, to be empowered to take care of our own health, it maybe seems overwhelming. But when you do those steps to ground yourself back in, and you're in your body and you're in control and you're slowing down and you're paying attention and you're listening to your body and you're telling your body that it's safe, I'm listening, you then will be able to look at those symptoms and see what they're actually telling you per lots of different ways. Like, your organs are talking to you. Like, I won't get too detailed down that road right now, but there are so many ways that we can, and there are so many modalities. There are so many practitioners. I use a lot of traditional Chinese medicine in the work that I do with the bioelectric body too. This is stuff that's been known for so long. It's just been so tabooed that we haven't looked at it, or it's actually pretty simple when we slow down and look at those things. But just our bodies are communicating with us, and they're telling us that there's something that needs to be looked at. And the underneath component to those things, from the 14 generations past, those are belief systems. So somebody in, probably multiple people, have come up against a stress or a struggle, and they went into fight, flight, or freeze, and they didn't come back out of that. They did not regulate back into that. So we're not talking just like normal everyday stresses, but like intense stresses that went on that weren't properly cared for or dealt with, that then ingrained in your body as a belief system, some deep belief system that you believe, either about, maybe it's that you're too much for others, so you have to suppress, or that you're not safe, it's not safe to receive nurture because somebody had a mom who didn't give them the right kind of nurture. And maybe in a more extreme situation. And then biochemically, what happens in those instances is that emotion has a frequency, and it imprints on the cytoplasm of the cells. It doesn't hit the DNA first. It hits the cytoplasm, because that's the water.
Right, I was just about to say, what is the cytoplasm? Is it, so it's the water, but is it almost like the etheric energy?
Yeah, it's like a fourth phase water, right? And yes, it is. It's like it's in the cells. It's enclosed in the cells. So that would make an imprint, and it would hold that frequency, and then that communicates because it's surrounding the DNA. That is surrounding the DNA, so that communicates to the DNA. And then our connective tissue is all bioelectric. So that's sending out signals. We have meridian systems, right? So we're like these energetic beings that have these like layers to us. So these things are coming back out into our reality. But it starts with those belief systems imprinting onto the water in our bodies, basically. And then that affects our DNA. And that's when, yeah.
So that's why you said awareness is the membrane. I wrote that down because I thought, wow, that's really cool. Awareness is the membrane. So we are kind of enclosed in awareness. And that comes into us.
Yeah, and that's our PowerPoint as well. Like once we realize whatever it is, right? And then now what can happen is we can realize it and then we can get stuck in fear. Our nervous system can be like, no, like it has not been safe to learn new things before. Frozen. I am froze here. And then, neurochemically, you start to produce certain chemicals, and then that will foster you to stay in that place. So yeah, it's a pretty amazing system that we have, but getting down to the belief systems is number one. And then that then affects like the neurotransmitters that we have that are really just feeding whatever it is that is needed to keep us in that belief system, because change is not what we want at a survival level when you're in survival mode or a fight, flight, or freeze, in a trauma response of some kind. But we've all gone through that. Like health is about rebounding. Health, we're not ever going to get to a place where we're not experiencing stress. Like there's always going to be stress. That's okay. It's how do we respond to it? Are our nervous systems able to rebound? What can we do to support that? And how do we get to those belief systems that we maybe don't even know that we're holding on to? And a lot of people do that type of work. And you can do it yourself. I don't think this stuff needs to necessarily be outsourced. Support is always nice for, support, but these are things that people can do themselves.
I'm fascinated by all of this. I love what you're saying. I noticed you very deliberately said that any kind of trauma that was experienced, but that we had no support to get through. I like that bit because I've worked with somebody called Robert Jardine who has studied German New Medicine quite a bit, and he's like German New Medicine basically says if you're ill, it's either because you've been poisoned, you've had an accident, or you've got an unresolved trauma that you weren't supported through. And according to the German New Medicine model, when we have a trauma that we can't process and we're not supported or loved, or where we don't feel safe or secure, our biological mind or our I don't know, like something biological happens, and we will have, like, for instance, like a lot of people who can't digest information, because it doesn't feel safe something's overwhelmed them, and it can start with lots of gastrointestinal stuff or stuff stuck in their throat. Because biologically, if we couldn't digest something, our body would create changes to widen the gullet, and to create more saliva. Our body would make actual biological changes to be able to get rid of what was blocked. And when we resolve it, our bodies then like close down the throat again, and any extra cells that were produced get shed, and it might come out as a cough or a sore throat or whatever. I mean, I'm kind of not paraphrasing, but I'm kind of putting my own context on it. But that's how it was explained, that any unexpressed trauma is also linked into a biological sort of like programmed event that we go through. And so that really, really fits in with me, because if we're supported through our trauma, we can process it. I mean, I notice this as a coach, and obviously I'm coming at it from astrology and neurolinguistic programming, which must sound so unscientific. But essentially, when I'm working with people, I notice, like through channeling, I say, we are effectively, as humans, we process information. We process air. It comes in. When it comes out differently. It's changed. We drink water, we urinate, we eat food, and everything that comes into us gets processed somehow and then has to come out. And it's the same with our belief systems. Everything that we experience like comes into us, gets turned around or changed. We have a reaction to it, and then we can let it go. And what I'm noticing is lots of people don't know how to let go. It's just fascinating. Sorry, it's a bit
no,
of
that was beautiful. So, yes to all those things. Like, you hit on some things I love to talk about too, that I'm not going to sidestep yet, because I feel like there's more to this part that we can talk about.
I want to.
There's so much. No, so okay, so
tell me more.
All the tingles now. So many things. Well, I will say that what I have noticed, and I'm sure this is not me, a lot of people notice this. A lot of the children that are being born in the last, I don't know how many years, my oldest is almost 8, so that's my marker.
Yeah.
They have a different energy about them. They're different. They're just different than maybe past children. It's a different generation. And I know one of the things in our journey that has been very effective with helping my son with integrating and what's going on with him is changing my parenting style and looking at my own attachment style. Because of my trauma from my past, I didn't have the absolute worst childhood, but there was a lot that I did experience, and there's a lot of generational stuff in my family. And I'm starting to learn that, like, with my energy field, the way I am so open, I have stored a lot, and I've had a really hard time letting go, and I've stored a lot for others and taking that on for them. That's just what my field does. So I had a lot that I was holding on to, and I needed to confront those things and look at them. And I really think that also can honestly be as simple as looking up attachment theory and looking at secure versus anxious, avoidant. Look at those and see what you see in yourself. Be honest with yourself, which isn't always easy. Like, it was not fun to look in the mirror and be like, oh, these are my problems and how I'm showing up as a parent. And I didn't experience those things, so I'm not readily giving them to my children. And that's creating more problems in a problem with our energy field and just the dynamics. That's been a big part of what we've done with both of our children, but it's made a really big effect with my son. And that's a simple thing. Now, we have also done detox, because at first I didn't realize we can reset these pathways. So now we're doing work to reset the pathways so that he will be able to detox, even though he was born with, impairments in those detox pathways. But what you mentioned about, you started to even get into like germ theory versus terrain theory with, right? Like, terrain theory being that our bodies were designed, and we have something called microzyma in our bodies that can transform into any bacteria or virus to clear out things that are stuck. Because, like you said, we are processing units. We are not meant to just hold onto things. But you will, if your body goes into that fight, flight, or freeze, and you get stuck in there. Like, if you're in freeze, which my kids used to say to me, Mommy, you look like a statue. Like, freeze was one of my big ones.
Yeah.
I couldn't I hadn't removed enough trauma from myself yet, I would be stuck. But we are designed to actually do that ourselves. Now, step one is we should be processing and making time and space to do that, and doing that with our kids. Being able to make sure that we're doing that for ourselves and working on that stuff. And then like, that's our job as parents, is to be able to allow them to test out who they are and process stuff and like move stuff through, they're little energy movers, right? Like, we all are experiencing emotion, energy is moving. That's what we are, and allowing them to do that and be that in a safe place and way, so that they can experience that and not hold on to things as well. But yeah, we will store some things. And I have someone very close to me right now in my family that just refuses to process and refuses to do that work of stuck trauma and looking at it. And it's a very overwhelming process if you've never done it, because it doesn't feel safe. You never did it. So you feel like you can't do it. You feel like, you don't know how. But getting started and just knowing that it's all already inside, like we can do it ourselves, that we don't need all of these things to get there.
You're right. Like animals, for instance, if they have a trauma of some sort, you'll see animals shake things off, like dogs and cats, they will, like, their hair might go out, they might shake things off, they'll go crazy, they'll run around. And I notice with my kids that they will go crazy and shake things off. And I actually remember that I used to do that. Now, one of the things that I noticed from the volunteering work that we used to do is that some parents would say, stop that, you're stimming. When kids, like, I had a friend whose daughter would spin around a lot, and that was her way of, I remember spinning around, but of course, if you get a diagnosis and then that's identified as something that is a behavior that indicates this, and parents often, and like at school, sit still, don't run around, be quiet. My kids are really noisy. They use their voices to get out of things. They've got a very, very noisy dad who also like sings at the top of his voice for absolutely no reason other than that's just what he does. But what I've got a couple of points I want to kind of like ask you about. Like the first thing I notice is we do have these ways and mechanisms of getting rid of stuff, but we have a lifestyle that we're born into that doesn't permit us to do that, or that if you do that, it gets listed as it's kind of like a pathology. Oh, look.
Yes.
Yeah. And then once it gets that label, then like kids prescribed something to take, to stop them from doing it. There's all these judgments that go on it.
It's like the system was so beautifully built in an awful way to like reinforce this thing to happen, where we're just end up being more reliant on the system.
Yes.
Right? Because, it's just brilliant in its.
It really is, especially if it's going to take us 14 years to
like we've
14 generations to actually understand what's happened.
But
and does that mean also that it's going to take another 14 generations?
No, you can clear all of it. So the work that I do like balancing sessions where we can quickly identify what belief systems are. Now, I also think you can do this yourself. If you can do things like cold therapy, which is very activating with your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system, and you will be able to identify belief systems that you're holding on to where you feel like you're not safe. So you can do these things yourself.
Wow. Could you teach me?
Yeah, it's
not now, but in another
totally. And I have learned I took a holistic practitioner course this fall, and I learned a very effective and fast way to target what belief system someone's holding on to. And then we connect the conscious and the subconscious mind for them to then process those things and then move forward. You could I would say within a couple months, if somebody has a lot of stored trauma, they could, without even, like, I have busy kids, like, we're busy. So I've been doing this work more directed and looking at the belief systems for a couple months, and we're making amazing progress, and it's beautiful. And I see it happening with all the women that took this course with me, the naturopathic doctor that taught us, the work that she does. So no, it doesn't take, that's the thing. Like, we are so amazing and magical and what we can do for ourselves. So once we realize that and ground into that and see what we really are, we can do this work ourselves. We can be supported in this work. It doesn't take that long to fix it up and then start seeing actual changes in, like, your physical life.
Wow. This is so brilliant. I want to talk to you all the time now.
So fun, right?
I can't believe it's taken so long for us to, like,
I know. Well, the timing is just perfect though, because I feel like we have been so deep in our journey, and I had to try everything. I was so involved in, like, I was really looking at the detox pathways and, like, how can we detox? I just need to keep detoxing. The belief system stuff didn't come in for me until this fall. So then I had to test it out myself and work on some clients, and then work on the kids and see, really, no, really, this is what it is, and read lots of books and confirm, like, the science to the spiritual to, like, I have to see the full picture in order to move forward with discussing something, so I feel like it's divine when we did get to talk.
Yes. Well, I love that, because I do remember that, when I've noticed some of your postings on social media before, you've been talking very much from a naturopathic kind of dietary perspective. And now it seems, in addition to that, there's something spiritual, soulful going on, or energetic, like the bioelectric field and whatnot. It's a bit like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? What, in your opinion, from what you now know, what's the most important thing to go for? Is it our belief systems?
Yeah. If I could do it all again, I would just get to that root right away, because I went very methodically. Like, I was like, okay, let's just remove the poison. Okay, step 1, remove the poison. Step 2, let's start to, I started to work on inflammation and the gut. So I was like, okay, let's give the gut what it needs. Let's reduce inflammation. Okay, we've got those things going on. Okay, let's hit some heavy detox and keep modifying the diet. So that's what we did. Then I kind of got to, okay, I'm going to actually work on myself now. I want to see what my trauma is. And a couple years of doing that work really slowly before I got into the belief systems, tweaking my attachment style. And then bam, we landed in belief systems. And I'm like, this is it. Like, I thought it was gut health. Then I thought it was heavy metals and inflammation. And then I'm like, no, but there's actually a reason. There's a belief as to why we are holding on to these heavy metals. And the belief really? The belief is, a lot of times, for holding on to things too tightly, is we didn't receive something over and over again, maybe as a child, or it could come from past generations. So our body just wants to hold on to everything, even if it's bad. So it is, and it's been convinced and it's been conditioned, and that's working in some way. It's working because maybe it's perpetuating even a victim mindset. Like, there's something that's working. There's a neural pathway that's going. This has been working. Not really, because you're not thriving, but you're surviving. And that's all that's ever been known. But there's a belief system. And if you can get to that belief system and connect the subconscious and the conscious mind and be like, no, you are enough. Like, what happened? And, I do, like, muscle testing, so indicator testing for a flow chart of Chinese medicine and different things to actually see what the trauma was. And if it's something like in your life, we talk through the trauma And it's not a long thing. It's like just connecting the subconscious and the conscious mind. And a lot of times, whenever that happens, the belief system is gone and the expression of the DNA changes. And like it's neural pathways. It's changing neural pathways.
And it's amazing because I guess if we go back to right at the start of the story, where you were studying the molecular basis of disease as a field application scientist and sort of involved in PCR tests and all sorts of different things. And then if somebody heard you talking like you just now, if they hadn't seen your process of how you've stepped from the like mainstream science and taken all of your little steps to get where, or big steps, not little steps, your big steps to where you are now, they probably wouldn't be able to understand the context of it at all. But actually, it makes complete sense.
Well, I'm glad it makes sense to you. It feels good to get it out there. I do have these conversations like on the side with like my other homeschool moms, and I don't have a huge community right now where I talk about this stuff a lot. I'm starting to talk about it more with women that have been following me and just trying to give them hope and little bits and pieces of like, you can do this. These are some modalities that have been working for us. I had mentioned that advanced cellular training to you. That's a modality that I was introduced to. The inventor, his name is Gary Blyer. I was introduced to that this fall when I did the holistic practitioner course, and we were introduced to a lot of modalities. We went over everything from homeopathy to Bach flower to cranial sacral to neuroemotional points, so many modalities. And then we each have our own like gifts and, interests. And this advanced cellular training really, I've tried it out and I've really been impressed with it. And it's something for me, if I'm going to talk about something these days, it's got to be something that can like fit into a busy life. Like I'm not going to promote something where you have to do like a 3-hour meditation every other day. Like, no, like there's not gonna work, is it? It's not going to work. Like, and it's not necessary. I'm finding like it's not necessary and it's not going to work in my busy lifestyle. So most of my friends are also moms that have a lot going on. So the advanced cellular training is a beautiful modality that's deep, but gentle and quick. And it's something you actually do yourself. What it does is it recodes your DNA from trauma back to how it was divinely designed to be expressed. So if you have those 14 generations of trauma, things have been changed from how we were designed to express. And what I do with people for that is I just have them fill out health history forms, and then I muscle test to pick out codes that were designed by Gary, and then they do the codes themselves. They read the codes and listen to some relaxing music, and that is rewriting the DNA, and that is then you will notice your belief systems are changing. You will start to notice things. Things will come up when you're reading the codes and you allow them to process. And you can even do this work for any blood relatives. So I've done this work. I can read it and I set a prayer and an intention that it's for my son or my daughter. And then it actually recodes for them. And I have noticed some changes. I know. And it's not expensive. But it's very deep. Work. So I love that work, and it's worked very well for me and my family. So that's something that I like to share about with people because it's something I find that's empowering and it's something you can squeeze into your life.
Yeah. Well, I can hear that you've got a very busy life. I can hear that.
Is there? I was like, I wonder if they can hear the dog is out there. Like kids are upstairs now.
To be fair, it's usually my family that I hear in the background. So I feel like I should allow you to get back. But before we come to an end, can I just ask, if somebody is listening today and thinks, wow, Bridget, I really want to connect with you, what's the best way that they could work with you or connect with you?
The best way, so I have a website that I'm working on that's all about having like nourishment in your integration process. But as my busy mom self, it's not totally finished yet. The best way for now is social media. So on Facebook, let's see.
And I'll put the links below in the show notes.
I'm just Bridget Early on Facebook. My maiden name is Keenan, so that's in there in parentheses. But yeah, Facebook or Instagram is the best way for now.
Fantastic. Would you be happy to have another conversation?
I would love to chat with you.
I'd love to chat more.
So fun.
Because I'd love to explore, homeschooling and mum supports and things like that. Because, I'm a homeschooling mum as well, and like the integration of this new way of being healed, healthy, whole, feeling it, expressing it. Like my husband and I said, we're drawing a line to the past. We're creating a new future, and this has to be how it is. It doesn't necessarily integrate very well in a normal sort of mainstream life. You have to kind of I think it's really useful to talk about these tools. So I'd love to talk again with you.
Yeah, I would love to hit on the homeschool stuff too. That was such I really pushed on, I wasn't going to homeschool. I felt a calling and I just kept saying, no. Yeah. And I went through a lot. I had to process a lot about, I think, like my shadow self on why I didn't think I could do that, why I wasn't going to be able to be successful in that for my children. So I would love to chat more about that too.
That sounds great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been an absolute delight to speak with you finally.
Thank you so much. This was so much fun. We'll do it again for sure.
Wow, wasn't that a special conversation? And Bridget is lovely. I loved connecting with her today so very much. Off air, just as I was saying goodbye to her, I asked if I could work with her myself. So I'm really excited to have a look at those belief systems from a new perspective. It was amazing that we were talking about Thomas Cowan and his book about cancer and water. I loved that sentence, awareness is the membrane. The journey that Bridget has been on has really, and also her interest in advanced cellular training and these codes and the DNA and how all the intention behind it and the energy and the emotions. It just beautifully packaged up in that talk. That was so lovely. So anyway, thank you very, very much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. Please do let us know in the comments below. If you like this conversation, then please do subscribe if you haven't already, hit the notification bell, and also please just share amongst your family and friends, anyone that you think might be interested in listening to the amazing information from Bridget. I mean, she really does encompass a lot of different things. There are lots of people out there, mums who sense that, there is slightly more to life and slightly more to being a mum than we've been let on to believe. There's also a lot of information. She's rich in advice and information about dealing with spectrum disorders or autism or Asperger's. There's so much experience that she's got in understanding it, unpacking it, working through it. Obviously, she was also talking about the detox pathways as well. So if you've got a medical background or a scientific background and you wanted to speak to her about that, there's so many different ways that she can sort of touch and inspire us. I absolutely love that. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us today. Hope to connect again with you real soon.